Despite its history extending back well over a millennium, the study of Halloween has only really been taken seriously by historians and folklorists over the past 40 years. Even in that space of time, the identity of Halloween has shifted, making it pretty difficult to produce a comprehensive and up-to-date account of exactly what Halloween was. With that, there exist many misconceptions about the year's spookiest night. Halloween is commonly believed to have had pagan origins, which is perhaps where much of the stigma of the night stems from. But proponents against Halloween often fail to realize that Halloween has Christian roots, right down to its very etymology, All Hallows Eve, a time assigned to the Christian calendar for honoring the saints and the newly departed. Yet Halloween is still nonetheless associated with the supernatural. Author Nicholas Rogers, in his work Halloween, From Pagan Ritual to Party Night, tells us that not all writers and historians agree on what transpired during the early times of the Celtic Druids, where Halloween originated, but that many stress its elemental primitiveness, its omens, its propitiations, its links to the other world of spirits. This association to evil has only been further intensified today, with the holiday's netherworld-esque properties still resonating with a modern audience. From jack-o'-lanterns to ghastly macabre outfits, the supernatural qualities of Halloween have never really been stamped out, and perhaps with good reason. One common idea was believed that during Halloween season, the barriers between our world and the other world were opened, and malignant spirits were able to pass through and cause harm. Therefore, people throughout the ages would don equally scary and ominous costumes in an effort to either disguise themselves amongst the spirits or to even scare them away. With that in mind, it's no wonder then that many have come to consider Halloween as an evil holiday and misconstrue practitioners as celebrating the devil and his ilk by basically dressing up as them. Rogers, however, argues that the supernatural elements of Halloween are kept alive by two opposing groups: New Age pagans and religious fundamentalists. On the one hand, New Age pagans speak of the importance of the natural uncanniness of Halloween, its therapeutic qualities in helping people touch the realms of myth and imagination, whilst also paying tribute to the ancient people who celebrated the holiday long before the emergence of Christianity. Some Christian evangelists, meanwhile, denounce Halloween and all of its spooky shenanigans as simply Satanism and the glorification of evil. In fact, according to Rogers, some have even claimed that Halloween is one of the Black Sabbaths, when witches meet to worship the devil, or that Halloween is the devil's birthday. Now, we might be quick to blame this simply on the aforementioned notion of people playing dress-up. After all, if it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck, then it's probably a duck. But in this case, as we've established, dressing up as macabre and sinister beings was never really about worshipping the devil. In fact, I've not been able to find a source that indicates that this was ever the case. Another idea is to blame this on the mischievous revelry that's always been associated with Halloween, where light-hearted pranks and tricks were commonplace activities that transpired over the Halloween season. It's possible that Christian fundamentalists found such pranks to be incongruent with their faith, especially by the time of the 1930s, where author Lisa Morton, in her work Trick or Treat: A History of Halloween, tells us that the nature of Halloween pranks became far more extreme, to the point that in 1933, during the height of America's Great Depression, it was dubbed the Black Halloween. The typical vandalism expected of mischievous boys celebrating Halloween soon became the work of hoodlums committing crimes, which saw people tearing down telephone poles, overturning automobiles, and opening fire hydrants to flood the streets. But another place we might look to blame the stigma of Halloween comes from a more obscure and somewhat insidious place, from the mind of one historian who actually got it all wrong. Charles Vallancey, a British military engineer, was sent on a surveying mission in Ireland in 1762. The thing about Vallancey was that he was not a typical militaryman of the 18th century British Army, but in fact a learned man who was believed to have been extraordinarily well educated in both history and linguistics. As a result of his talents, he fancied himself as more of a writer and a scholar than a man at arms. Vallancey took a particular interest in the ancient Celts and would pen hundreds of pages worth of details, observations, facts and folklore. Pretty much tomes of the stuff that resulted in his multi-volume Collectanea de Rebus Hibernicis, or the Collection of Irish Matters. Now, by the time of his authoring of this giant compendium, it was already well known that the festival of Samhain was indeed a festival that transpired at the end of October, lasting over a 3-day period. Other linguists at the time had even established Samhain as the end of the summer, or simply summer's end, but for Vallancey, this just didn't sit right. He believed that this was a mistranslation and that Samhain was not a mere festival, but in fact a Celtic deity, an insidious one, who came to take away souls akin to the Grim Reaper and presided over the Celtics as a lord of the dead. He wrote, "Samhain, or Baal Samhain at this season, called the souls to judgment, which according to their merits or demerits in the life past, were assigned to re-enter the bodies of the human or brute species, and to be happy or miserable during their next abode on this sublunary globe." Hence Samhain was named Baal Sarb, or Dominus Mortis, for Baal is Lord and Sarb is death. According to Morton, it didn't really seem to matter much to Vallancey that the name Baal Sarb doesn't appear anywhere else in Celtic lore, and that despite having probably known this, Vallancey still attempted to shoehorn in this imaginary deity that he'd created. What's more, he seems to create his own mythology for the entity here too, describing it as a judge akin to any other god of death in any number of pantheons, and applying the principle of reincarnation here, which though wasn't unheard of in Celtic myth, is still not fully understood. Orientalist scholar Sir William Jones dismissed Vallancey's entire work, amongst others, saying, "Do you wish to laugh? Skim the book cover. Do you wish to sleep? Read it regularly." Yet despite such harsh criticism and the universal panning amongst scholars, Vallancey's work still made its way onto library shelves all over Britain. Morton tells us that his imaginary deity Samhain sat neatly alongside traditional Celtic folklore and Irish texts, those that actually had the right interpretation. What's worse is that as late as the 1950s, texts like Halloween Through 20 Centuries by authors Ralph and Adeline Linton were still referring to Samhain as this evil death deity that Vallancey had basically made up. It's no wonder then that generations later, people legitimately believe that Halloween had been exclusively a paganistic idea, and that the likes of Samhain served not only as the ominous lord of death, but also as an idol or a false god that is strictly prohibited in the Christian faith. Bishop Kirill of Seattle, in volume 43 of the work Orthodox Life, shared a scathing and untrue statement saying, "On the evening of the festival, a huge bonfire built of oak branches, which Celtics believed to be sacred, was ignited. Upon this fire, sacrifices of crops, animals, and even human beings were burned as an offering in order to appease and cajole Samhain, the Lord of Death." Morton is genuinely perplexed. How is it possible that religious and community leaders would use the writings of a romantic who was denounced in 1818 as having written more nonsense than any man of his time in order to denounce a major celebration, she writes. And it's true, Halloween is arguably the second most popular holiday of the year, and yet our understanding of it has been notoriously skewed and tainted. Considering how obscure the Celts are to us, partly on the account that much of their traditions were passed around by word of mouth, such vitriol against the Samhain festival might be forgiven. After all, even the Romans referred to them as Celtoi, believed to be derived from the Indo-European word hidden, thus making the Celts quite literally the hidden ones. So it would make sense that the Celts and their festivals suffered from such misconceptions. Yet some of Vallancey's contemporaries make even his illusionary deity and scathing opinions seem tame by comparison. In the historical works of Devonshire by author Richard Polwell, We are told of the Celts, this degenerated priesthood seems to have delighted in human blood, and their victims, though sometimes beasts, were often men. And not only criminals and captives, but their very disciples were inhumanly sacrificed on their altars, whilst some transfixed by arrows, others crucified in their temples, some instantly stabbed to the heart, and others impaled in honour of the gods, bespoke amidst variety of death, the most horrid proficiency in the science of murder. Yet in spite of these perspectives from the Romantic period, the ancient perspectives from the likes of Julius Caesar himself indicate that the Celts were not these savage, degenerate primitives, but rather a people skilled in mining, working in metal, farming, and even medicine. As aforementioned, Samhain was also believed to be the time when the doors between our world and the other world that the spirits lived in would open. Again, you can see why when this festival evolved into Halloween, it came with the stigma of devilment or wickedness. On such a night, these spirits could cross over, and fairies or the Sidhe could emerge to cause havoc. The festival itself took place to mark the end of the summer, and thus the beginning of winter. Here, the most recent harvest and the temporary abundance of food would be celebrated, and according to some surviving archaeological accounts, it was one of the few times in the year when the Celts would have access to booze. Therefore, the festival was often associated with drunkenness and a lack of inhibition, furthermore distancing itself from what would become traditional Christian values. Morton tells us that the 3 days of Samhain were also important administrative days, almost akin to the US tax day in modern times. She tells us that a yearly gathering was held at the ancient seat of kings in Tara, where there were 3 days of feasting and sporting, alternating with debt and repayment trials. Indeed, those who were guilty of any heinous crimes were also executed during this time as well. What's more, we understand that all the home hearth fires were extinguished, and that druids used what they called need fire, fire created by friction, to construct a large bonfire. From this bonfire, embers were extracted and distributed to each household, from which a sort of tax was taken for this service. These bonfires that were lit were also believed in some interpretations to offer protection from the wandering spirits over these 3 nights, as well as to honour the recently deceased as well as past ancestors. The festival was also believed to feature various activities, with people wearing masks and costumes to allow them to move incognito amongst the roaming spirits. Though historians still debate the extent of Samhain's influence on modern Halloween, it's clear that the old Celtic feast, with its strange blend of harvest ritual, wild revelry, and dread of the unseen, left an indelible mark on what the night became. When Christianized Irish scribes preserved the memory of their pagan past, the Irish themselves folded elements of Samhain into the newly sanctioned All Saints' Day, creating a union that, in time, would trouble the very church that first encouraged it. We've also seen the damage that mistranslation can cause, and how the stigma of Halloween belonging to evil forces may have been perpetuated by Charles Vallancey's claim that Samhain was the name of a Celtic god of death. Such a mistake may have indeed cast a long shadow over the legacy of Samhain and Halloween in general, and helped cement the idea still echoed today that both Samhain and Halloween were born from something dark and malevolent, an error that continues to haunt popular imagination. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to leave this video a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.